Well, hello, and welcome back to the program, to the Primetime Podcast. I know a lot of people thought maybe because the Mobile County election is over in the primary this past May the 19th that somehow or another the podcast will end. Well, it's not. The podcast is a labor of love, and we hope you stick around to watch it. Today's podcast really is just an observation of the last two campaigns that I've been involved in. While we came up short, there's a lot of lessons learned, and just some observations that I want to share. I've had quite a few people reach out to me and kind of wanted to know what we learned about it and would I run again for any type of political office. Well, the short answer is simply this. Yes, it's always open for consideration, right? I am a kind of guy, I don't get caught up with the naysayers and the hecklers on the sideline. If I was that type of person, I never would have been as successful as I was in the world of policing and of course, climbing the ranks to become the chief of police for the city of Mobile. At least share with you some experiences that I had along the way. And so we'll start primarily a contrast between the mayor's race and the sheriff's race. And what I did find is that it is far more easier to run for an open seat than it would be, certainly, in my opinion, for running against an incumbent who already has the seat, right? As an open seat, people are willing to take a chance with you, to give you money. You got to have money. I think we raised somewhere around $175,000 for the mayoral election. And, you know, of course, we were very frugal with that money. And while we came up short, there was a lot of interference with the mayor's race for the city of Mobile. Namely, probably one of the largest interferences where they moved, I believe it was 13 of 37 polling locations across the city of Mobile. And that created a lot of hiccup. A lot of people didn't get to vote. A lot of people got sent from one location to a next. To cast essentially what was a provisional ballot. And if you think about 13 of 37, that's roughly 35%, or one out of every three, a third, if you will, of the polling locations. So you can imagine the hiccups. And I know Wes Allen, the Secretary of State, for whatever that's worth, came to Mobile here recently, a few months ago, and was talking. He called them hiccups with the city of Mobile in hopes that the city would correct and remedy some of the problems. And I think later, here recently, they removed about 37,000 people off the voter roll, whatever that number was. And I think that's disingenuous, right? Because that should have been done before the election. But nonetheless, that's what it was. And unfortunately, in the state of Alabama, municipalities and towns can run their own electoral process without any oversight from probate court, which typically runs every other type of elections in the state of Alabama, though that at the county, state, and the federal level. And while that law is, I don't know, if I had to guess, that was probably some political corruption years ago where they were able to maintain control. And that's important because, you know, the power base has to maintain control typically to be able to run and do things they want to do that benefit them or their circle. The sheriff's race, we knew was going to be an uphill battle, right? Because incumbents are hard to beat. And everybody in my inner circle was constantly told, incumbents are hard to beat for many reasons. Why are they hard to beat? Well, you take the sheriff's election. You know, everything that we showed you on the podcast is true and correct, you know, and there were a few opinions that were based on information that we had, but we made sure to be very clear that those were opinions. But why is it hard for incumbents to be removed, right? Because of familiarity. If the public doesn't see the need to change, if the public thinks the person is sitting in that office, they typically will continue to vote that way. That's just the way the public is. This past primary produced, you know, far less voters than it did 4 years ago. It's a midterm. Nobody really gets excited about primaries. And I'm not really quite sure that why that is. I don't know that I've ever missed an election, but that's just the way it is. And so incumbents typically can enjoy the benefit of knowing that their seat is pretty comfortable short of doing something egregious. Now, as a challenger, as the incumbent, my job was to show the world how we could do it better. We showed up a lot of systemic failures that were in the current administration, but it was all for naught. Why? Because the incumbent ran, I think, really, him and his team ran a great strategy. I told my team I would run the same strategy if I was him, and that's one of the things he always says. He says it at virtually every meeting that he attended. If it's not broke, why should we fix it? And I really do think that was ingenious, right? Because that required me as a challenger to show the world how it's broke. Now, I know we did the podcast, and I'm grateful for all of you that came and watched it and shared it and subscribed to it. But you have to understand, the podcast, while it's a labor of love, we just started it about January, getting it up off the ground. Probably should have did it last year. We'd had more subscribers and viewers, but that is what it is. But while the podcast was great, if you look at the amount of people that were watching on YouTube, that was only a fraction of the thousands of views we got on Facebook. But as we go and looked at it, everybody wasn't watching the podcast. Had they done it, I believe the outcome would have been largely different. I believe another reason the incumbent did very well is because he is able to campaign on duty. And while it's a conflict of interest, it goes against Alabama state ethic laws using your county vehicles. None of the public simply just didn't know. And I can tell you those things, but advertising. I know at least since maybe November or December of 2025, during the stump on the campaign trail, the sheriff's office and the sheriff was using money recruiting videos, and that allows the sheriff to be on TV. And I do believe there was a hiring freeze with the sheriff's department with all county positions. There was a hiring freeze, but yet, the sheriff's office was still using money to be on talk radio stations and to advertise for recruiting when they wasn't able, in my opinion, to do so. Now, was it illegal? No, that part is not illegal. They're able to do it and they leverage it, and that was probably smart on their part. But the average public just simply don't know, and familiarity really does matter. You can have all the name recognition all you want, but if you have the incumbent on TV all the time and they're presenting that they're doing a great job, then in your mind as a voter, you only know really what it is that you know. You don't have all this inside information. And so to that end, I think they were really, really great. I called for a debate. He refused. I probably would have refused as well, because he was sitting from an elevated position, if you will. So it was really up to me to show the world how it could be done better. And we did that. I think we did everything that we could. I was not upset about the outcome because short of raising probably another $100,000, it was just really, really hard to be competitive when you're talking about mailers and you're talking about TV advertisement. And, we did a lot of talk radio advertisement. We could afford that more than we could broadcast. We did a few broadcasts. But another 10,000, 15, 20,000 really wouldn't have made a difference. We probably needed another $100,000 to really be effective in getting that message out there based on the amount of money and the type of work ethic we did. We were not outworked. That's a fact. I was not outworked on any of the campaigns. But in the world that we live in, money really does matter. Now, I know that some people may look at Doug Harwell and Rusty Glover in the state Senate 34 district, where some would say it was an upset based on the amount of money the Harwell team spent, but it really wasn't. That was only a portion of Mobile County, a district, if you will, rather than the entire voting base of Mobile County. And so, and I don't take away from Birch's plan. I think they did very well on that, and credit goes to where it's due. And I think they did a great job on that part of it. We had a lot of challenges. We had people stealing our signs. We showed on the YouTube channel and certainly the Facebook video that we put out where it looked like some connections, either employees or maybe associates of some sort with the sheriff were apparently stealing our signs in broad daylight. And who are you going to report that to? I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's over. But who are you going to report that to? The sheriff is the last line of defense, and if it's him or his people, whether he had knowledge of it or didn't, when I put the video out, I think it probably should have been addressed, but nevertheless, it wasn't. I think another big significant player in this thing was the lack of media attention. We were talking about all these other positions, but nothing really affects us more in our community and public safety. And I find it very ironic. The Call News and the Lanyap and, of course, broadcast media, they were all silent for the last 5 or 6 months on the sheriff's race, once everybody announced they were going to be in. And they've been silent on all the issues that have been brought up. And of course, we know they watched the Primetime podcast based on some of the verbiage that they use in their write-ups. But nevertheless, well, of course, when the campaign's over, it was all about the sheriff's race. I mean, you can't make that up. But the media gets their paycheck a lot from advertising and doing business, certainly with the sheriff's department and the city and the county, and they all go hand in hand, and it's that big power base that goes well, and it really does matter. Some other things that I learned is during the mayor's campaign, it was really prevalent that a lot of people were calling me business owners and saying, look, man, I like you. I like everything you're about. I like your integrity. I like your stand. I like your dispositions. I like everything that you're presenting. But, one guy told me, he said, I'll be honest with you. He said, I've had a couple of people from, the inside Politico world that were saying, look, your business could be hampered or hurt in some kind of way if people find out that you're supporting Prine. And I thought, man, what have we got to in society where people are now calling and making veiled threats to business owners because they want to go a different direction. And then so what that does is prevent that business owner and his sphere of influence from coming forward. This stuff really goes on behind the scenes. The average voter just really doesn't have a clue. You just say, oh, I like this guy or I like that guy. But if you really knew what went on behind the scenes, you would most definitely vote different than you're accustomed to doing, whether you like the candidate or not. But anyway, in that particular case, I thought maybe the guy was fibbing. Then we started having other business owners coming by and telling us essentially the same thing. And then we found that to be the case during the sheriff's race. I had one guy, he's a business owner, and we put a big campaign sign up on his property. And he calls me back a few weeks later and said that one of his customers of 20 plus years essentially threatened him and said, I'll stop doing business with you if you don't take that prime sign out of your yard or off your property. And those things really do happen behind the scenes. You know, we were battling the county a works department. Kind of big. I think one of the county commissioners, no doubt in my mind, was kind of behind it because he's a big supporter of Birch. But they were picking up all of our signs. We were constantly, and every time we went over to Camp 1 at Halls Ferry and Schillinger's Road, our signs were the only ones there. I think Rusty Glover's signs were there. But I didn't see any of the other signs. I guess me and Rusty were the only people maybe the county wasn't really pushing for. But it is what it is. You know, I have since learned from other politicians outside the state, this goes on everywhere. So you're not going to stop it. I'm just telling you what I've learned. As a 30-year law enforcement officer, I'd learned, you know, and dealt with all the bad people in society. And you come to expect that out of, the people that commit the crimes in your society, right, your community. But if you really want to know what people are like, get in the world of politics, and you'll find out even some of those that you think are very upstanding, prominent citizens of society, they are the coldest, meanest people in the world. And what I also find out is everybody wants to be on the team until you tell them no. And when you tell them no, you really see the vindictiveness come out of people and start attacking your character and your integrity and your campaign supporters and all that go in with that. We've seen a lot of that, but nevertheless, it's neither here nor there. One of the most disappointing things that I've seen in both campaigns was the local pastoral leadership in this county, and not because they were on one team or the other. In both campaigns, they're the incumbents or the establishment, had their supporters. We certainly had ours, but across the board, what I found out that the men of the cloth are supposed to be men above reproach. And Sunday after Sunday, all of them do it. They say they don't. They say they walk a fine line, but they'll preach. It doesn't matter what political party they endorse or don't endorse, but they get up there and they skirt that law, and they always talk about corruption, and they always talk about politics, and they always talk about how politicos and politicians are not serving the people. And that's because of flawed humanity, and all those things are true. But what I found is that a lot of the pastoralship and the leadership in this county, especially the more prominent ones, they're all more concerned with having their political influence and having access to incumbents or to these offices for a host of reasons. And while I understand the importance of that, as people of faith, we should be more concerned of overall good governance and leadership in office rather than what benefits us the most. Now, I say that, but this has been across the board with everybody. Everybody is more concerned with political gain, personal gain, or influence. What do I mean? You get it about political gain. There was Birch had, it was kind of ironic, and I know the guy, but this guy, he's doing a commercial, and he's talking about how, Birch is the guy for the job, and Birch has 100% clearance rate on homicides. And I thought to myself, wow, how would he know that? Because as you guys know on the Primetime Podcast, there is no annual report that's given out or an annual running report, 5, 10, 20-year report on crime with county jurisdiction to include homicides. So how would you know what that number looks like other than that's what the sheriff or somebody told you? But then I dug a little bit different into the matter and then found out that the same individual that's praising him on TV is the same individual that is a vendor or contractor with the sheriff's department. And you can't make this up, but the average everyday citizen simply just does not know this type of thing. So I think it's kind of humorous in many regards, and it's funny. You're not going to change it. It is what it is. It's politics for a reason. But I also learned some other things, and money matters. And while in not every case, there's a reason that most of these ruling class communities, Mobile is one of those, while they win more than they lose, is because they cherry pick who they're going to get behind. And rest assured, when you raise the kind of money that some of these politicians raise with the ruling class getting behind them, it matters, but you no longer answer to the public. You answer to the ruling class. And while credit is due to the sheriff, he ran a great campaign. I think he did. I think he put it out there, and he overwhelmingly championed his position by large numbers. It was a landslide. But that landslide has to be also, I think it has to be put into context, if you will. And maybe it's not as impressive when you put it into context. He spent over $500,000, $535,000 to win that race compared to $37,000 that we spent on my campaign. And so while he was successful in doing that, money does matter because it pays for advertising, it pays for mailers. And I've heard citizens say, oh, I hate all these mailers. Well, let me just say this. You may hate it, but it works. And that's why the politicians pay a lot of money. Some of these mailers to just get to 30, 40,000 people can be somewhere between 20 and 30, $40,000 a pop. And it takes money to run those campaigns. But unfortunately, I still say that whoever the old machine supports is probably the person you don't want, but the average voter simply don't know. Now, I do know that voters like to go out and they like to rail against national and, federal politicians. But it's something different when the local politicians are doing the same thing that a lot of you voters are railing against. And the only reason I can think that maybe we don't call out the local politicians as a whole is because then it may cost us something if we come out and do it. It's easy to do it against the president. It's easy to do it against a congressman or a state senator or even, maybe the governor because, it's safe. It's safe to do that because, a lot of people may go along and agree with you. It's hard to do that at the local level for fear that you're going to become a target or lose access or whatever the case may be. It is what it is. It's not going to change. And last but not least, I guess what I am disappointed about big time is the Republican Party. When I became the voting age in the late 80s and started voting, the thing that attracted me to the Conservative Party was certainly the moral convictions that it seemed like politicians had back then. Fiscal accountability, personal accountability, being a strong advocate of the Constitution as it regarded our rights. But I have since found out over the years, both political parties lie to their constituents. The local Republican Party specifically is entrenched with this old Mobile machine. And they're not really fighting, in my opinion, and I'm not casting aspersions on them. I mean, it's just politics, as they say. But they're not really fighting for conservative causes. You've got people that say they're conservative, but they're really rhinos or they're really Democrats, but they run as Republicans because we're a Republican county for the most part and a Republican state for the most part. But they're not really Republicans based on the values of the Republican Party. We're blowing money left and right. The party doesn't care. We don't hold criminals accountable. The party doesn't care. We don't have and hold personal accountability for politicians specifically. The party doesn't care. All the party really cares about really is about the status quo. Who stays in power? Who gets to go to the country club? Who gets to enjoy all the benefits of being in that pecking order? And I thought maybe with the sheriff's race or a local county race that the county vote would be vastly different than the inside city of Mobile vote. But as I've looked at the numbers, we won't go over them today, but I will tell you there are some huge anomalies. A lot of Birch beat me by some 12,000 votes, but those 12,000 votes essentially I think came from around 7 or 8 polling locations within the city of Mobile. And so if your Mobile electorate really essentially chose who the Mobile County Sheriff would be, although they don't get no real benefit out of the sheriff's office in terms of public safety. Last but not least, I want to take just a moment to thank each and every person that gave one single penny to this campaign. We spent your money wisely. We would not have been as effective, in my opinion, had it not been for your contributions to this campaign. I want to also go ahead and take this opportunity to thank certainly all of the volunteers. The heart, the soul, the integrity, the labor that you put into this campaign to help us move it forward cannot be understated, and certainly the Prine family is in debt to you. We love you, and we certainly thank you for everything that you contributed to the campaign. Opportunity to thank my wife. It is, with everything that has been said and done, you have been just fantastic. The campaign was a lot of work. You worked full time. You took care of your family. You certainly took care of me, and you did all the work that carried the load for this campaign. And for that, That is the reason I love you. We have been together for so long. We have been together for 38 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 38. So those are the things how I see it. Again, I'll tell you, credit to where it's due. Paul Birch, congratulations to you. Job well done. You've earned the job, and but we can still hold you accountable. And I think that's what government should do, is be accountable to the people. That being said, I ask all of Mobile County to support the sheriff, support the operations of the sheriff, and at the end of the day, it's still us versus them. My friends, the Primetime Podcast will continue, and we'll be talking about those roads of intersection and social dilemmas affect us in everyday life as it regards local, state, and certainly federal politics, policies, and certainly politicians. My friends, thank you, and we'll see you again on the next program. God bless.
Meets the weight of the choice. People deserve to know it's more than talk. It's more than a name. It's duty, trust, and standing in the flame.